you have just been handed the keys to a kingdom. Literally, you are the king. You've got borders to defend, a massive economy to run, laws to uphold, and on top of all that, you want to establish this central place of worship that runs 247 without a hitch. I mean, how do you actually organize that? How do you handle the money, the army, the guards, the agriculture, all at the same time?
It's the ultimate logistical puzzle, isn't it? And, usually when we think about ancient kingdoms, we focus on the great man theory. We look at the visionary, the guy giving the speech on the mountaintop. We rarely stop to look at the organizational chart that made it all function.
Exactly. And that is what we're doing today. We're taking a deep dive into a part of the Bible that, let's be honest, most people skim over. It just looks like a dry spreadsheet. We're looking at First Chronicles, specifically chapters 26 and 27. And I know what you're thinking. Chronicles, isn't that just a long list of unpronounceable names?
It certainly can look that way on the surface, but if you look closer, specifically at the text around David's royal administration and the order of Israel, you find something fascinating. It's a blueprint. It's, you could argue, a masterclass in organizational design.
Right. Our mission today is to uncover the philosophy behind King David's infrastructure. We're going to see that order here wasn't just about bureaucracy or red tape. It was about facilitating worship and, ensuring fairness. It's the hardware that let the software of the kingdom run.
Yeah, and it connects back to what we've discussed before about the musicians. Just as they were organized into 24 groups for constant worship, the rest of the kingdom, military, gatekeepers, officials, was organized with that same precision. You can't have a 247 worship festival if the city gates are unguarded or the treasury is empty.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We've got a lot of ground to cover, from the treasury all the way to the camel sheds. So where do we start? Let's start with the first line of defense. Segment 1, the gatekeepers.
The gatekeepers. So 1 Chronicles 26 gives us the breakdown, and the first number that just jumps out is the sheer scale of it. There were 4,000 gatekeepers.
4,000? I mean, that seems like a massive amount of overhead for just standing by a door.
Well, that's the thing. If you view them as just doormen, then yeah, it's excessive.
Yeah.
But they were all Levites, and their role went far, far beyond just standing guard. The source material details a scope of duty that's really comprehensive. It wasn't just security. It was facility management, asset protection, logistics.
The source mentions they were in charge of the storehouses.
Right. Think about a temple in the ancient world. It's not just a church. It's a bank. It's a granary. It's a treasury. The gatekeepers were responsible for the intake and outflow of all of it. Food for the priests, oil for the lamps, equipment.
So if a golden bowl goes missing, that's on them. It's high-stakes inventory control.
Exactly. And there's this detail about how they were assigned their posts that I find really interesting. The text says they cast lots for each gate, the small as well as the great.
So it didn't matter if you were from a powerful, famous family or a smaller one. Usually, the influential clans grab the best posts, right?
Typically, yes. But here, they used a system designed to bypass all that political maneuvering. It was a meritocracy of sorts, or maybe a theocracy. By casting lots, they believed God was directing the assignment. It ensured equality. You didn't get the best gate just because your dad was famous.
Speaking of dads, we have to talk about Obed-Edom. The source explicitly highlights him.
Yes, Obed-Edom. This is a great little human interest story tucked into the org chart. The text emphasizes that God blessed him.
Blessed him with a lot of kids, it sounds like.
Yeah, that too. He had 62 able men among his descendants. But the text doesn't just say he had a big family. It describes them as men of strength for the work.
I love that phrase, strength for the work. It suggests his family was gifted specifically for this operational duty. They weren't just, warm bodies filling a roster.
It implies a family culture of competence. Obed-Edom was basically running his own elite security firm within the larger force.
Right.
And the text gets very specific about where they were stationed. It mentions the West Gate, the Shalacheth Gate.
And it describes the positioning as watchman opposite watchman.
Right. It paints a picture of tight, coordinated security. You have overlapping fields of vision. It's an accountability system. No one is left isolated where they could be bribed or overpowered without being seen.
So you have these 4,000 highly organized operations managers keeping the site running. But an operation this big needs funding. You can't pay 4,000 salaries with good intentions. Which brings us to segment 2.
The treasuries.
Right. 1 Chronicles 26.2. You have Levites like Ahijah in charge of the treasuries of the house of God and the dedicated things.
Dedicated thing sounds a bit vague. What are we actually talking about here?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The source focuses heavily on verse 27. It talks about the spoils of war. Okay, so normally in the ancient world, if you go to war and you win, you keep the loot. That's your bonus. To the victor go the spoils.
Precisely. That's standard operating procedure. It's why you join the army to get rich. But here, the text says that soldiers dedicated spoils won in battles to maintain the house of the Lord.
Whoa, that is a significant shift in mindset. They are capitalizing the Temple's maintenance fund with their own combat bonuses.
It is. And the analysis in our source points out that they did this willingly. They weren't taxed. There's no decree forcing this. They took what was rightfully theirs and just gave it to the temple.
That reminds me of that concept in the New Testament. Is it 2 Corinthians?
Yes, 2 Corinthians 9.7. The idea of being a cheerful giver, not giving out of necessity. The source draws a direct line between these ancient soldiers and that principle. They were funding the center of their spiritual life out of gratitude, not duty.
It really shows where their heart was. You don't give away your retirement fund unless you really believe in the mission.
They were building the infrastructure of their faith with the work of their hands, literally through the battles they fought.
Okay, so we have the gates secured and the funding secured. Now we need law and order. Segment 3, the magistrates.
This is 1 Chronicles 26.29. We're looking at officers and judges, and again, these are Levites.
And this is where I think modern listeners might get a little confused. We are so used to a separation of church and state, but the source describes a dual mandate for these guys.
It does. It says they monitored matters of God and affairs of the king.
So they were religious leaders and civil judges at the same time.
In this context, yes. We have to remember that in ancient Israel, the civil law was the Torah. There was no secular constitution. So if you had a property dispute or a contract issue, the law governing that was the law of Moses.
So the Levites, who are the experts in the text, were the natural choice to handle civil disputes. They were the lawyers and judges combined.
Exactly. But what's really brilliant is how David distributed them. The source mentions a split between the west and the east banks of the Jordan River.
The west versus the east.
Yes. On the west side of the Jordan, the main heartland of Israel, close to Jerusalem, you had Hashabiah and 1,700 able men.
Okay, 1,700 men. But then you look at the east side.
The frontier. The tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh.
Right. And the text says Jerijah oversaw that side. But he had 2,700 men.
And not just men, but capable men. Heads of fathers' houses. The best of the best.
So why the difference? Why do you need 1,000 more officials on the east side? The population was probably smaller there.
It's risk management. The east side was wilder. It was further from the capital, more exposed to foreign influence. The risk of them drifting away culturally, politically, was higher.
So David allocates more resources to the area that is harder to govern.
Exactly. He puts his senior leadership out on the frontier. It shows he wasn't just using a cookie-cutter approach. He allocated resources where they were needed most.
That is just smart governance. You don't put your best managers where things are running smoothly. You put them where the wheels are about to fall off.
Precisely.
Okay, let's shift gears to the big one. Segment 4, the military. 1 Chronicles 27.
The standing army.
Now, the dilemma here is classic economics, right? You need a big army to be safe. But a big army means thousands of young men standing around instead of farming or building. It drains the treasury and kills productivity.
It's the guns versus butter problem. Usually you have to pick one. But David had a solution.
The rotation system.
He implements a rotation system. The source outlines 12 divisions, one for each month of the year.
And the numbers are huge, 24,000 men per division.
A total force of 288,000 men available, but, and this is the key, no single soldier served more than 1 month a year.
That seems incredibly short. 1 month. By the time you get your boots laced up, it's time to go home.
Well, think about the strategic brilliance of that. First, it prevented burnout. You aren't dragging men away from their families for years on end. Second, they could return to their normal lives, their farms, their businesses, for 11 months.
So the economy doesn't tank because all the workers are gone.
Exactly. They are citizen soldiers. But you still have a massive trained force ready to mobilize. You always knew who was on duty in March, who was on duty in April.
It makes the budget predictable.
And predictability is the mother of stability.
Now, there is a little note in there about a census. 1 Chronicles 27.24. It says Joab began a census but didn't finish it.
Yes, wrath came upon Israel. We know from other parts of the Bible that David's census was seen as an act of, well, pride.
Why? I mean, we just praised his organizational skills.
Mm-hmm.
Why is counting the troops suddenly a problem?
It's about motivation. The expert analysis suggests that taking a census in that context was shifting reliance from God to the raw data. It was saying, look how big my army is, instead of, look how great my God is.
So counting for logistics is fine, but counting for ego is a sin.
In a theocracy, yeah. The source notes that because of the divine wrath, the final number wasn't even recorded in the official chronicles. It's a somber reminder.
A very valid point. Data is useful, but it's not a savior. All right, let's get back to the economy. We mentioned the soldiers going back to their farms, but the king had his own property to manage. Segment 5, the king's economy.
Yes, 1 Chronicles 27.2531. This section really shows the sheer scale of David's resources. We aren't just talking about a box of gold. We're talking about massive agricultural and logistical operations.
The granularity here is what gets me. He didn't just have a minister of agriculture. He had specific guys for everything.
Specialized management. I mean, let's run down the list. You had Ezri, who was in charge of tilling the ground, just the tillage. Then you had Shimei over the vineyards.
Right, Shimei just watched the grapes grow. You had a different guy, Zabdi, in charge of the wine produce and supply.
Supply chain versus production is distinct. Then you have Balhanan over olive and sycamore trees, and Joash over the oil stores.
Again, growing the olives and storing the oil are two different jobs.
Then the herds. Shitrai the Sharonite was over the herds in Sharon, while Shaphat was over the herds in the valleys.
But my absolute favorite detail in this whole list is the camel guy.
Obil the Ishmaelite.
Yes, Obil the Ishmaelite.
The expert observation here is crucial. An Ishmaelite managing camels makes perfect historical sense. The Ishmaelites were desert people. They knew camels better than anyone.
But they weren't Israelites. They were technically foreigners, often rivals.
Correct. And that tells us something fascinating about David's hiring practices. He hired for competence. He needed someone who understood camels, so he found the best person for the job, regardless of their tribal background.
It really challenges the idea that ancient societies were completely insular. David was pragmatic. If you want the camels to survive, hire the camel guy.
Even if he's from a different background. It's a lesson in diversity of expertise.
Last bit here. Segment 6, the inner circle.
7.32, the cabinet, the king's personal officials.
And here we do see some family.
We do. Jehonathan, David's uncle. He's described as a counselor, a wise man, and a scribe. You want family you can trust close by.
But then we get to the drama. The source calls this the climax of the personnel list because of the story hidden behind the names.
Ah, the tale of two counselors, Ahithophel and Hushai.
If you're just reading the list, it says Ahithophel was the counselor. Sounds fine. Perfectly standard.
It knows that name is synonymous with betrayal. Considered the smartest man in the kingdom. But during the rebellion of David's son, Absalom, Ahithophel switched sides.
He defected. He used all that wisdom to try and destroy David.
And that's where the other name comes in, Hushai the Archite. He's described as the king's companion.
Friend of the king. When Ahithophel betrayed David, Hushai was loyal. But he didn't stay with David.
No, this is... David sent Hushai back to the palace. On bad advice, specific advice of the traitor Ahithophel.
It really is a spy thriller, tucked away in a list of government officials. You have the brilliant traitor and the loyal double agent listed right next to each other.
And the source points out the takeaway. This personnel list hides a story of espionage, loyalty, and ultimately divine intervention. It reminds us that you can have the perfect structure, but ultimately you are dealing with people. And people are capable of incredible loyalty and devastating betrayal.
Structure doesn't guarantee loyalty.
No, it manages risk, but it can't cure the human heart.
So what does this all mean? We've looked at gatekeepers, treasurers, judges, generals, farmers, skies. When we step back and look at this whole picture, what is the big takeaway?
I think if we synthesize all of this, the main thing is that David's kingdom was built on this mix of spiritual devotion and incredibly practical logistics.
We tend to separate those. We have secular work and sacred work.
David didn't see it that way. The army existed to secure the peace so the temple could function. The farmers grew the food so the priests could eat. The gatekeepers managed the flow so the worship could be orderly.
The bureaucracy wasn't the point. The worship was the point. The bureaucracy just made it possible.
Exactly. The source suggests this order wasn't just for efficiency's sake. It was to create an environment where constant music, worship, and praise could happen without chaos. The bureaucracy existed to serve the worship.
It really changes how you view admin work, doesn't it? It's the skeleton that holds the body up.
It is. Without the skeleton, the body collapses. And there is one final thought from the source on the spoils of war that I think is worth reflecting on.
The soldiers giving up their loot.
Yes. If the soldiers, the ones doing the fighting and bleeding, gave up their hard-won bonuses willingly for the house of the Lord, what does that say about the culture David built?
It suggests that they valued the center of their society, the worship of God, more than their own personal gain.
Exactly. It raises a provocative question for us. Is true order actually just a byproduct of shared values? You can have all the charts and managers in the world, but if the people don't care about the mission, it falls apart.
Can you actually organize people into caring? Or does the caring have to come first?
It's the difference between compliance and commitment. David had a structure for compliance, but he cultivated a culture of commitment. He built a structure, but the people filled it with heart.
That is a powerful place to leave it. Structure matters, but heart matters more. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the administration of ancient Israel. We'll catch you next time.